Hey, bird watchers, welcome to another episode of the Shift Left podcast. I'm Dan Malzarski. I'm your host, and I'm joined today by Marzio Colombi from Comparis, and we'll be diving into the gritty reality of integrations that fall apart when scaling, localization. We'll unpack some horror stories. I know that I have some, and just in look at the rise of the duct tape systems and how robust connections and connectors done right can transform content velocity and translation quality. And so we'll talk a little bit about the evolution of translation quality as well, and kind of what we're doing with AI nowadays, and trying to evaluate machine translation quality as well. So Marzio, thank you so much for joining me. This is your first podcast ever. You're telling me you've
Yeah,
never done a podcast before, so.
no, first time.
All right. Well, it's
Thanks for
always
having
first
me.
time for everything. Always first time for everything. I remember. I don't remember the exact episode, but I've been podcasting, now for 12 and a half years. So
Well,
my first couple episodes, I don't think I could go back and listen to them. Probably, I still, even today, like I listen to my previous podcasts, like, I should have done that better, but don't worry about it. No need to nitpick. We're here to have fun. We're here
yeah.
to talk a little bit about technology, and how about you? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Marzio? How'd you get into this industry?
I'm currently located in Switzerland, so I was born here. So we're very used to learning languages and speaking different languages. So that for sure helped. But then I just wanted to work with languages, so I did like my studies in Geneva at the Faculty of Translation at the University of Geneva, and then I started right away working as freelancer. And then in 2022, I landed at Comparis as a linguist, basically. And then during the years, I transitioned to more the tech side, let's say, of localization. And I work now as language technologist and product owner at Comparis.
My first manager in this industry was a Swiss woman, and of course she knew the four languages out of Switzerland, but then ended up learning Arabic and Korean. And it blew my mind that someone can just like absorb so many different languages. Do you oscillate between the language in your head? Is there one primary language that you think where does it like jump around?
Yeah,
Because
yeah, absolutely. So I'm from the south of Switzerland, so where we speak Italian, as you can probably hear from my accent. And so that's my main language. And then I also speak English, German, and French. For work, now I mostly speak German. So sometimes there are German words now that slips in even when I speak English, and sometimes very, very annoying, but that's the way it is. Unfortunately, I'm not learning Arabic or very difficult languages yet.
Yeah, well, it's also fascinating too, Switzerland and the languages, because I mean, Italian, French, yeah, Romance languages, but then it's like, let's make it fun and throw a Germanic language in there, and then
Yeah,
English as well, a couple of Germanic languages, and the Romance ones. So I at least with the Romance ones, and again, being very general here because I barely speak Spanish, I barely speak French. I know a little bit of this. It's like it's okay to slip up every so often in there, but like throwing a German word in an Italian sentence, I don't know. I don't know how the Italians would take that.
yeah, but then in Switzerland, the funniest thing is that so we have these four official languages, let's say three and a half. Um, but at the end of the day, in the German-speaking part, they don't even speak German because they speak Swiss German, which is like a language. I mean, different languages because every canton has its own dialect, and some are really impossible to understand for me. For example, sometimes it's also fun.
Very cool. So yeah, I mean, so our main topic of today, of course, we're titling this episode "No More Duct Tape," connectors that don't suck. Because listen, I mean, I've been in this industry for a while now, and honestly, like I remember when connectors started to become a thing, and at the time it was kind of like It was revolutionary. It really was. This concept of, oh wow, like we can get into these systems and pull out content and try to, like, the concept of the show, shift left, right? How do we move from the current state into moving upstream and trying to get content out? But now it really it is. It's like looking at, uh, statistical rule-based machine translation. Like, it's all right, cool. It's pretty revolutionary. And now where we've come with the technology, and the traditional connectors now, it just they seem a little bit, outdated and monolithic in a way. What's your take? What's your take on connectors nowadays, or integrations, and the evolution of that?
Yeah, so I would make like a distinction between what we should call probably traditional connectors or integrations, and maybe other platforms like Blackbird or their Make.com, Zapier, and so on. If we talk about traditional connectors, I have like kind of an unpopular opinion in the sense that I don't have horror stories, and that I don't like them. I think they're great because usually you want to look to use a connector when you already have an idea, so you already know what you want to do. And connectors are a very straightforward way to do that without coding skills. Usually, you just buy a subscription, install a plugin, and then you're good to go. So I think that any solution that makes life easier is good. That being said, obviously they have some cons, obviously, because they're very limited. Usually traditional connectors only allow you to do like a couple of things. If we think about like the classic localization connector, which is like the TMS CMS connector, with which you can pull content to translate and then push it back in the CMS. Usually there's not much more that you can do with those connectors. So they're great if that's your use case. But the main cons, I think, is that it limits you. So it doesn't allow you to think a little bit out of the box. So you're stuck with this workflow. You can't evolve from that. And so that's where basically platform like automation platforms come in.
Do you think, in your experience, or just speaking to colleagues, do you think that companies tend to maybe underestimate the complexity of connecting systems? Because they, even what you're saying is absolutely, you have a use case where you are CMS to CMS, you're pulling content in, you're pushing content back. That seems pretty straightforward. But even so, like understanding the context of things, and then how to get the content out of your TMS and into your billing systems, and operationalizing these things. I think, from my experience, I think that people tend to think that integrations are a little bit easier than they actually end up being. I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, they probably want them to be easy. And what they then do is that they set up workflows so that connectors work well. And so you end up with maybe a situation where you have like a connector to pull the article from the CMS. So the translation part is solved because you can pull it and push it back like very easily. But then you also have like, I don't know, the way you contact freelancers, the billing system, and so on. So I think that people are not really underestimating how easy it is to use like a traditional connector, because it's actually pretty easy. But what they're actually underestimating is what they could actually do with another tool. So again, maybe with a traditional connector, you solve a single issue, but then you're stuck there. So maybe if you zoom out and look at other solutions or other platforms, you quickly start to realize that uh, there are so many possibilities out there to connect multiple tools, because that's also another problem of traditional connectors, is that they're usually tool specific. So usually they connect two specific tools. And if you need a third one, for example, or if you need like an LLM to do anything, if you need to record something like in a spreadsheet, you can do that. And so if we start like shifting away from these traditional connectors, maybe we can realize how many possibilities there are out there, because there are a lot.
it made me thinking too, is like a lot of these connectors were built to solve the traditional content management systems, right? And now with the headless CMSs, I think that there's a new complexity involved in
Yeah.
trying to connect up to those systems, especially with the flexibility and the ability to code things within some of these CMSs. And um, you're familiar with some of the more modern content management systems as well. Any considerations you need to take about trying to connect up or solve content from a headless CMS?
Again, if you have like a traditional localization workflow where you have like the content, you have to pull it, translate it, and push it back, and you have a connector, you won't really have many issues in terms of like actually handling the file, the structure of the file, and the elements of the page. Because usually, if there is like a connection that is specifically built for two tools, it means that it should theoretically work flawlessly. So everything you pull should appear very well in your TMS, so you should be able to handle it pretty easily. Uh, However, if you want to like build more complex workflows, you want to integrate many different tools. If you want maybe to bridge the content on different tools, different, I don't know, a TMS, maybe then you send it to an LLM for post editing, and then you send that to quality evaluation tool, and then you push it back into the CMS. That can be much more complex because any tool any tool is built differently, and every tool has, so the files that every tool spits out basically will be different. So that's the main challenge. We've also faced that a lot with our CMS because they have like a quite complex structure, let's put it that way. And so we have like maybe some machine translation engines that don't really handle it very well. So we always find like tags in the middle of the text, and so that's a struggle. But then maybe you can solve the problem with an LLM that maybe handles those files more easily. So as soon as you start like building up workflows, you encounter a lot of issues. Um, so yes, this kind of complexity is definitely a little bit underestimated because everyone is used to these traditional connectors, so they're always used to have like a solution that is like a plug and play solution. But this doesn't work if you want to involve many tools.
I think it's a great segue too, because you've done some research, of course, in machine translation and quality estimation, and you've built some complex workflows yourself that is focusing in on solving this just problem, right? Interoperability of content is and making sure that it can flow through the different tool sets to be able to do things like machine translation, quality estimation, APE. A lot of these more modern uh, processes that a lot of localization teams have incorporated or are incorporating or will incorporate. What's your experience with that? Like, like kind of how that research and process go? Like, what was the catalyst of trying to solve a problem or test these theories out?
Yeah, basically, so the main issue at the beginning, as always, was how can we reduce the manual work to the minimum? So how can we, for example, like a click, I want to like a click with a click in our CMS, I want like to create like a project in a TMS. I want to translate it. Then when a click, I want to push it back without like a specialized connector, obviously, because that would be very easy. So that was like the beginning, and I think that everybody sooner or later is confronted with this kind of issue because in 2025 we're tired of downloaded file manually. You see the German word slipping in, obviously. But then, as soon as this kind of workflow works, then you start to realize, okay, how can I make things faster? How can I make things smoother? And especially, you start to think a little bit outside of your bubble. So what we were seeing, for example, is that so maybe a little bit of context here. Comparis is like a company that, so the mission is to be the consumer empowerment platform in Switzerland. And so basically we offer many comparison tools for different kinds of insurances, for example, or we operate the biggest real estate platform in Switzerland, so the one with the most listings and so on. And alongside that, we produce a ton of content, so a ton of informative content that help basically consumers make decisions. And how it it used to work was actually that everything is produced in German, and then everything is translated. But then every article, I mean, not every article, 80% of the articles are regularly updated. And these updates don't necessarily only involve like updating numbers, updating figures, and so on, but sometimes there are entire paragraphs that needs to be rewritten also for SEO purposes and so on. And so what happened was, okay, we have an article that gets updated. We send it to translation, and then we publish it. The traditional localization workflow that we all know. But then we started to realize that everything was basically done in German, in the sense that the prioritization was set in German. Every article in every language required the same amount of resources. Every article in every language was basically was so the risk associated with every article was basically the same, because we simply got the text and then translated it and pushed it back in the CMS, and then that's it. And so we started thinking about that and trying to find solution to optimize resources and try to automate as much as possible, because we found out, for example, that some articles are maybe super successful in German, but in French nobody reads them, or the same applies to Italian and English. So, and it's very different. So there are articles that perform very, very well in a specific language, and other that maybe are perform super well in German, but in French, not really. And so we started to a little bit to think how we could leverage this information, this data, in the localization process, and adapt our localization process to reflect these changes. And so we basically, my former manager and I, we basically defined a workflow that, based on the traffic of a specific article in a specific language, based on that, we basically decided how the article had to be translated. So we can go deeper in that. I can even show you and walk you through the workflow if you want to. And so this is actually a way that we try to apply this sort of shift left approach. So instead of always being the last piece of the chain that translate the content that was produced in German and that was prioritized in German, we tried like to move a little bit forward and try to influence our work based on data.
No, it's fantastic. And, I guess the follow-up question to that is, I mean, based off of analytics, being able to determine what gets translated, what doesn't, based off of high quality machine translation we have nowadays and quality estimation, automatic post editing, do you envision a time where some of the content won't even need human intervention, like completely fully automated, just goes out there in the public, and maybe then more data is collected to see how the public is reacting to the translation, and then add a level of human review if needed? Do you envision something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that it's already happening, and in some cases it could already be like the standard. Because these engines and these LLMs now are so good at producing language that if you have like a general purpose article or something like that, it's very likely that the translation will be already very, very good. Then I think that I'm not sure if, so the fact that a translation might need human that reviews it doesn't necessarily depend on the quality of the machine translation, because so for example, an example that I always mention is that it's we don't let, for example, laws. So we don't machine translate laws and then publish them right away. But in my opinion, I'm probably wrong, but we're not far from that. I don't think that the reason why we don't do it is because the machine is not good enough, but it's because the risk is very, very high if something goes wrong. And so I think that's the main reason why we will need humans to review translations, not because of linguistic accuracy, but because of, I don't know, brand related risks, or I don't know, if I think about like a medical translation, it's probably very good because it's very standardized. The terminology is a problem that is almost solved. But what if something is wrong? Then there is an issue, and we always need someone to blame. So there will always be people that have to review those kind of texts.
It's almost like the insurance industry, if you think about it, right? It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, bringing in a human to review the content is like your insurance policy on that content. Is
Yeah.
there are inherent risks with it, and having a person tied to that risk as opposed to just trusting machine. And listen, I mean, I've seen great content come out of machine translation and LLMs, but I've also seen times where it's like stuff gets injected, stuff that
Yeah.
wasn't in the, so there's still unknown risk. But yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right in regards to there's some content out there that probably could just be fully automated and just kind of turn, and there probably are the companies that are out there just doing that, and hopefully doing it responsibly by having,
Yeah.
these different check places. And I would love to see a workflow. Yeah, I mean, I think this would be great for
Yeah.
people to see some of the stuff that you've been working on, and walk us through something that talks about this topic.
Okay, so this is the workflow I was talking about earlier. So the one with the different localization workflows, depending on the traffic. So as we see here, we have as a trigger, for example, every time a story is published, this workflow gets triggered. This is just an example. Obviously, if you want more control of it, over it, you can change it and add, for example, when you transition the story to a different status or something like that. Then here we have like what is, I think, very interesting. LV stands for language variants. So this workflow is actually the evolution of a workflow we used to use a couple of months ago. And in that workflow, the traffic was measured. So the traffic of the German version was measured, and which makes sense. But also it doesn't make so much sense because, as I said before, there may be pages and articles that perform well in one language that perform very poorly in another. So what we wanted to do is try to follow a little bit the famous first LangOps principle, which is understand all customers regardless of the language they speak. Usually what this means is try to speak as many languages as possible, but I think that we could also interpret it differently, in that we could also say that customers, so they talk back, but not necessarily with language. So if we see, for example, that an article doesn't perform well in English, it means that our English speaking users are not really interested in that article. And so we can take this information into account to then define how we can handle that translation. So this is I think quite interesting. So what we do here is basically for every translation that we already have, because quick reminder, these are always articles that are updated. So we already have a translation. So for every translation that we have, we measure the traffic, and then we define the workflow. Here's something that I could add maybe is that we are using traffic, but that's obviously just one option. I talked, for example, to a couple of colleagues that they were considering using simply the author. So if the author, so there are, for example, author that we know that we don't want to machine translate and publish, but that we always want to check. So you could do something like this, or you could potentially use engagement like comments or sentiment analysis or something like that. So it's really customizable. And here we go to the different workflows based on the traffic. So the first one is maybe let's start from the low risk articles, which are the articles that don't generate much traffic. So if they don't generate much traffic, we assume that our users are not very interested in them. So the risk is very low because there are not many people looking at the actual articles, but we still want to have like all the information up to date on the website, also for SEO purposes and so on. So what we actually do is that we export the content. In this case, we create a project, in this case in Phrase, where we have like our anti-engine integrated, and we simply pre-translate it with the anti-engine. And then we do like a sort of automatic post editing with OpenAI. This is useful because, as I mentioned before, we had a lot of issues with the structure of our CMS files, and we noticed that when it's mainly a question of tags. So we noticed that when the text was machine translated, the tags were often misplaced. And so we found out that when if we go through like a post editing step with an LLM, they can handle it fairly well. So they may fix those issues. And then once this is ready, we simply import it back in the CMS, and potentially we could also publish it straight away. So in this case, these also answer a little bit your question in the sense that in this workflow, everything is automated. So there is no human in the loop. The article is machine translated. We have like a automatic post editing step, as I mentioned, which also checks for terminology issues and grammar issues and fluency issues potentially. But it's fully automated, so we don't have like a human that checks the machine translation. Then we have like the medium risk articles. For this workflow, we started experimented with MTQE. In this case, the MTQE model that is integrated in Phrase, I don't remember actually what it's called, quality performance score, I think, something like that. And so here the idea is that, okay, we say that the article poses like a medium threat, there is medium risk. And so what we want to do is machine translate the article as we did before, but then we can have like an engine evaluate the quality. This could be done at text level or segment level. It was very cool in Phrase because up to, I think until the end of 2024 or something like that, they offered this option where you could basically, so the system evaluated every segment, and then you could specify, okay, if a segment gets a score that is above X, you can confirm it right away, lock it, and so on. Everything else stays open, and the linguist can check those segments. So this is interesting because again, you have human intervention because, as we said, the risk is a bit higher, but you don't really spend as much time as you would for like a new article or for a very high risk article. So you have like segments or potentially entire articles that are considered well translated, and you only focus your effort and your resources where they're actually needed. Needless to say, this needs a lot of testing and experimentation because you need to figure out if the evaluation system works, especially in combination with your MT engine. You need to figure out how to set this threshold I was talking about to automatically confirm the segments. But I mean, the testing phase also goes. It's also important before when you're figuring out the traffic threshold to differentiate the different workflows. So obviously, this must be individually evaluated. So you need to have a look at your metrics and see what for you is considered like a high risk, high traffic article. So this is
Now
the second one. Yeah.
with risk, are you basing the risk just on it's not just on content type, it's more along the lines of just the interactions or just the views that it's getting? That's how you're kind of determining risk?
In this case, yes. So we assume that. So the assumption is if the traffic is high, it means that the article is very interesting. But it also means that there are many people that that see the article. So we don't want to have like. So we want, for example, we want to make sure that the test is accurate, that it respects our tone of voice, and so on. So all these little elements that can only be proved by humans. And for an article that maybe has, I don't know, 100 views per year, it's not really relevant
Absolutely.
because.
Yeah.
But if an article has like 50,000 views every month, you probably want to maybe have a look at it.
Very white glove. Yeah. So, I mean, not specific to you, but just it might be a use case for someone else out there, using an LLM to kind of evaluate the content, look at the
Yep.
content and almost like categorize it based off of risk. If there is, in certain industries, maybe it's a blog post that has very, limited, impact if it's mistranslated. Yeah, I mean, there's always an impact with mistranslation, but again, a blog post versus if you're extracting content and it's medical content or something like that, you can almost use an LLM to evaluate the risk
Yep.
of that article and then have a similar decision tree like this. But yeah, I mean, I think this is for your use case, I think this makes total sense. Yeah.
Yeah, this is also a good point that I wanted to mention before when I was talking about like difference between traditional connectors and like automation platforms. Because as I said, traditional connectors usually are tool specific, which means they connect to specific tools. But when it comes to like automation platform, the good thing is that you're basically tool agnostic. And so in this case, we use Phrase, we use OpenAI, and we use the MTQE model in Phrase because that's what we had. But potentially you could replace all these tools with other TMSs, other CMSs, other LLMs, a specific MTQE engine, or instead of MTQE, as you said, you could give the source text and the target text to an LLM and ask for feedback. So this is a huge advantage of automation platform that you basically, as I said, tool agnostic. So you can integrate almost any tool, and this is huge because this allows you to really experiment with a lot of things, and you're not limited to what the connector developer thought when they were developing the tool. And yeah, just quickly to finish the walkthrough, this is the workflow for high risk articles, and this is simply a normal MTP project. So the project is created in Phrase, machine translated, and then the linguists go through every segment and check it. So it's I think that one of the most interesting part, as I said, is this one. So the fact that we're measuring the traffic in the target language, because again we're shifting left. So we're defining in advance how we will handle different use cases, and this allows us to not only to define our own prioritization, because maybe, as I said, a German article has high priority because it performs very well in German, but the same article in French and Italian is not very successful, so we can deprioritize that and focus on other things. And we can also allocate resources more effectively because we focus our attention, our effort where it really matters.
No, I think it's great, and just again for people that might not be as familiar with Blackbird, some other options you can even consider. You can have checkpoints, right? You could be
Yep.
having a checkpoint where you're waiting a specific amount of time and then evaluate like the results again. You could
Yeah,
speaking of
we
like
used to do that. We used to do
yeah.
that with the old workflow. So basically, what happens is that after everything is done, for example, we take this one, which is like the raw empty workflow. After the story is published, we wait, for example, 3 months, and then
Hmm.
we measure the traffic. And if the traffic increased like substantially, we can think about like going through like an MTP workflow and have the translation checked more carefully. And ideally, you would do that continuously.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that would be
Hmm.
also a challenge, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely, and especially you want to uh, you know understand that some content is forever, right? I mean, there is some content that like, you not forever, but could last you quite some time. And
Yeah,
then there's the newer content that, of course, will need the closer attention. And then the other thing I was going to mention too is, and not necessarily needed here, but like so, even with phrase, you can have an event trigger that waits for the linguists to do their work, to do their post
yeah,
editing, and then
absolutely.
take that content out and do other things. So checkpoints, I think, are something also when we're thinking about modern tools like this, as opposed to connectors, is that concept of um, there, it's not just a continuous process between CMS and CMS. There are these other tools at plays, and there's still humans in the loop. So you need
Yeah,
that kind of like ability to toggle between when a human's doing their activities and then when it's ready for the next step, and vice versa. So, yeah, I just
yeah,
again, this is a fantastic workflow, and I think that I'm seeing this for the first time, and I'm I'm really impressed with it. And I think that for those of you that aren't familiar with Blackbird, this is pretty cool. Like, yeah.
yeah. Checkpoints are great. I started working with Blackbird when you didn't have checkpoints, and it was like you felt you could immediately feel that that was one of the pieces that were missing, because you ended up basically building different birds
Hmm.
that could have been one. So yeah, they're great. They're great.
Awesome. Well, no, I appreciate you sharing this. This is really really fantastic to see what our customers are building and putting together, and it's always eye opening to see the different problems that people have, challenges, and how they're working to solve them. Because also, I feel like there's people that are probably having similar challenges out there, and they don't even know where to start, right?
Yeah.
So, as we're closing out, like any advice on a starting point of where you would advise someone if they have a complex localization problem. It doesn't have to be this one, but any complex localization problem. Like, what's your advice on where to even start to dissect it?
Yeah. So the first thing would be to actually see if you have a problem, because most of the times I see people that want to like implement AI, implement automation, but they don't really know how, because they don't really know what they want to achieve. So if you start with a problem, it's much easier, because you know what you want to solve, and you know basically what your goal is. Um, so this is the first one. The second one would be to start with what you have, because sometimes, especially if you're like a little bit uh, of a geek, you always want to like try out the new tech and the new tools and the new, I don't know, the most innovative shiny tool. But most of the time, what you already have is enough to start. If I think, for example, about TMSs, um, you're always trying to find like the TMS with the most integrations, with the most features, and so on. Use a free TMS like MadeCat or SmartCat, I think, is also free. Um, it covers probably 80% of the use cases that you want to cover. So this is another another advice. You don't always need the last shiny toy, but you can also try to figure out how to solve the problem you have with the existing tool or with free tool or with the AI. Even though I'm not like a huge, I mean, I don't want to say that I'm not a huge fan, but sometimes I have like the impression that most AI workflows could simply be scripts. So I think that if you can do it like programmatically with scripts or with um, specific actions that don't involve AI, do it because it's deterministic. It's always better. But if you can't, give it a try, and it may surprise you.
Awesome. No, appreciate the advice. And of course, no duct tape. No, stop using duct tape on
Yeah,
things. And there's better ways. So, Marzio, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it. And then, of course, for everyone watching at home, appreciate you watching. And until next time, keep shifting left. Thanks again.
thanks for
Bye.
having me.